All right, well, welcome to another episode of Energy Bites. I'm Bobby Nealon. We got Rad Dad John Calfan with us here.
How's it going, guys?
Welcome, welcome. And before we introduce our guests, we want to make sure, please make sure you go review our podcast. Hopefully give us 5 stars, but if not, please just give us some really good feedback and make sure you subscribe. But really excited. We've got Reishin Toolsi here with us from Databricks.
Welcome.
And, not just, I know John and you've got some history, but I'm excited. I'm pretty well in tune with the whole Snowflakes, Databricks, that side of the world, understanding like kind of the strengths, weaknesses, if there are weaknesses of Databricks and some of the different stuff in the market. So definitely interested to pick your brain on it. So.
Coca-Cola versus Pepsi.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But let's jump into it. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, kind of how you got into energy and or tech.
Oh yeah, so Reishin Toolsi. I'm now a resident of Houston, Texas, and I like living here, so I'm going to stay here for a while. Until the heat gets to me, like most folks would, and then we'll see. Maybe a few more summers, and then we'll decide. Originally I grew up in South Africa, and I ended up living in England, so I'm a dual national as such, and now I live in the US. And I started my career in pure tech, software engineering, medical diagnostics, and then ended up in I worked for a company called Schlumberger back then, which now changed its name to SLB, and kind of moved around. Ended up in Houston, and then during COVID, actually, which is kind of an interesting experience, I was dealing with Databricks as from a client perspective,
okay,
and I was kind of giving them a hard time about saying, hey, you could do these things better and these things better, and actually a guy in there said, hey, you know what, you should come work for us. And that's usually how most of these conversations go. So we had this conversation, and I liked what they were doing. COVID was an interesting time to make decisions. So
yeah,
I joined this startup company back then. And when I joined, I think there was like maybe 800 people or so. And it's definitely
exploded. Yeah,
exploded now into a much larger. There's a number that they're targeting by the end of the year. And I think, they'll get there as well. So it's doing well. They call it the rocket ship. It's my first real rocket ship, and I'm excited to be part of that.
That's awesome. I love being able to see not just people from the energy space do well, but also people from the energy space getting into like bridging that energy tech gap, so to speak.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people in tech think maybe our problems are easy, or like from the outside, or that they've solved them. But until again you get someone who actually understands both sides of it, and you're like, no, this needs to work better.
So let's talk about it for a second. Let's just jump into what is easy, right? So fundamentally, let's take energy as being, because the way I look at energy, and the reason I joined Databricks is because I get an opportunity to work with energy, not just, so I have a passion for oil and gas because I have a lot of respect for the industry, but energy itself, I keep saying this, right? So that, it's this connected ecosystem now of energy. Oil and gas powers the utility industry. Utility industry powers our homes. Without electricity, our world and our lives will be a very different place. It's not a place I want to live in, right? So the challenges around those industries are immense. You got heavy assets. You're dealing with transporting lots of dangerous material as such. You're working in high pressure, high dangerous environment, drilling deep into the earth at high pressures, drilling out to sea,
in the middle of
nowhere. And it's also a global kind of industry where you have to deal with geopolitics and wars and all sorts of consequences of it. Those all and that all adds to it. So I have all the respect in the world for all the other industries, but I still think without energy, none of those things will actually exist.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we'll be living in a very different world. So I'm very passionate about keeping the industry going and being successful in it, making others also successful in the industry.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people realize how directly correlated economic growth, wealth, innovation, technology are all directly tied to cheap energy, reliable energy, right?
Well, let's take a dire situation. You're out in the middle of nowhere, and basically you're sick. And right now, if you have telecoms, a helicopter could get you to rescue you. An ambulance could drive out to you and then transport you to a hospital. Rubber for the tires, silicone for the tires, the oil that actually can keep those vehicles running, the communication and transportation. And then when you get to the hospital, the supply chain that provided you the medicine that's going to keep you alive. And then the R&D over the last 50 years that basically produced something that's affordable.
Mm-hmm.
And the knowledge that we got from basically communicating with people around the world to basically bring you the best care is there and you don't think about that.
Yeah. I mean, from everything to the actual medicine itself, to the IVs, to
the transportation around
everything.
The knowledge
even
sharing.
just keeping the lights on at the
Right.
hospital.
Keeping the lights on.
I mean,
Yes.
it sounded like a similar you were describing before we got on, about situation in South Africa now. I think people in the and that still is a developed world, but when you say United States, Western Europe, we just take for granted that I flip a switch and the light comes on, and
the energy comes from the wall.
Air conditioning, right? Keeping us warm in June and July in Houston, and the air dehumidified. But
so that's a great example. So I grew up in South Africa, and I still have some linkage to the country. I don't want to get too much in the politics of it all, because I find politics not just divisive, but also very, very boring, right?
Yeah.
Because there's much more exciting things to talk about, right? But basically, due to mismanagement, corruption, and just lack of maintenance, the infrastructure is basically failing around maintaining their power grid.
Yeah.
So they go through daily. This is for years. Every day there's a dramatic amount of power failure. And this is easily documented, and there's lots of cases about where now businesses can succeed, because you're going to have diesel to power the generators, but just the cost of keeping your business going, groceries and transportation, it's impossible. So now it's failing, and it's fundamentally because lack of infrastructure, investing, also some diversification. They too invested in their coal and only coal. They could be looking at other sources of energy to kind of manage that. That's something to think about too, right? So the reality of being hyper myopic about energy.
Yeah, well, I think that's probably one of the biggest, I think, problems, misconceptions about the energy space as a whole, is that there is a silver bullet, one size fits all solution. And it's that's not necessarily the case in most areas.
Yes,
right?
that's true.
We need all energy. And
right. It's about energy. I haven't really said it much on the podcast, but we have been actively pushing it more at DW. It's about energy addition. As long as that energy is cleaner than the prior form and can be more affordable, accessible, reliable, more energy is better than less energy.
That's right.
Generally speaking.
And we're kind of in a unique, let's just take, because I live in Houston. You guys probably live in Houston. Yeah. Or you live, in an area. And so we have a lot of sun here. Right, I mean, maybe there's a lot. Yeah. There's no shortage of sun during summer, but even during the winter times, so solar is ramping up. So there's a really great solar companies in Houston that are kind of taking off. And what we're finding is that now that if you have a smart home, or you're very cost conservative about how you manage your homes, and most new homes are basically kind of built for this, you're overproducing energy. So either the energy goes back into the grid, which you can sell off at a fraction of what you're generating. Or, and now we're seeing vendors out there that are basically finding ways to basically create a marketplace for energy, so you can sell it to you at peak prices,
local, regional,
right? And then all of that, and this is now going to be my pitch. All of that basically is a challenge around data, right? Mm-hmm. So fundamentally, you got billing data, you got operational data, you got functional data coming into it, unstructured, structured, real-time batch data coming into it, and really, this is where we're seeing these kind of central platforms of data kind of picking up, right? And the more flexible and the more a platform allows you to kind of work with different types of data and streaming and batch and ingesting tools, and then also in real time at the same time. And the most important part is actually the data format around it needs to be in an open format, so you can communicate and allow you to plug in and play with other people. Right? So this is where we're seeing the Databricks product, which is the Lakehouse, kind of be very pervasive, actually then gain a lot of market share because of this, right? So we're seeing this happen because the world is moving towards this kind of connected ecosystem for communicating and collaborating and even competing, right?
Yep.
We're seeing competitors kind of use our product, but also share data, sell data, and then work with data.
So I mean, it sounds like we're kind of pivoting into Databricks. One thing, because I kind of know it, but I want to make sure other people, listening or watching kind of understand. Can you kind of walk through the history of Databricks, what it started as and what it's kind of morphed into? I mean, it was starting from Spark, and because some of them were the original Spark people, right?
Yeah, the founders were the original creators of Apache Spark. When they basically created the libraries around Apache Spark, and they created Spark, and they made it open source, which is great. And they basically created a community around that. And that community, I think there's millions of Spark users around that. And then I think they thought about the ability, and there's a whole great story about called Truth Tellers out there, and the Databricks story. It's much more well written and much more eloquent than I can describe right now. But they formed the company Databricks based on this foundation, and they actually created a kind of an open source format called Delta, which is really what the core engine for Databricks really is, and it's the core engine for Spark. is the ability for us, to kind of like process this data in this like format. So we have this Delta format, which is still open source Parquet format. There's no data vendor lock-in into it. It's yours. You can work with it.
Hit it from R, Python, whatever.
We can work in Python, Scala. We can work in SQL. It's great, and that's it. And they created Databricks as a company that basically they built these optimization tools around it. So they brought in their knowledge, they love for this passion around it, and they kind of built a series of optimization engines around Databricks, and they kind of created this platform as they evolved called the Lakehouse. And on that was a single platform where you can basically do business insights. You can do your visualization. You can work in multi-cloud. So we partner with all 3 cloud vendors. And then we're now bringing in more governance. We have this thing called Unity Catalog, which is really around creating good governance, because once you have good data, you need better governance to kind of manage that. And then, security is kind of an issue as well. So we manage cybersecurity as well. We also work with the cloud vendors. That's where your data kind of sits in it. And then we have technologies for like sharing information, like Delta sharing. So that's the ability for you to, share data in a cost-effective way that was never possible before. Right? And what's interesting is, and this isn't me trying to push a product or not, but it's a consumer-producer type relationship with Delta sharing in the sense that you as a consumer don't have to be a Databricks customer, but the producer does. So let's say you're running an operator and you basically want to share some real-time data or some near real-time data with a transportation company or vendor. You could share that with them. They don't have to be a Databricks customer. So it makes you more efficient in terms of like vendor management.
Yeah, and that's relative to like say Snowflake, because Snowflake has the being able to share across accounts, which is really nice. A couple clicks of a button is shared across, but that's in their own proprietary format, and you have to be a Snowflake's customer to consume it on the other side.
That's absolutely right. So there is a proprietary format around that, and actually, as we'll put it out to the customers and say, we believe that your data is your data, and fundamentally there should be no vendor lock-in, right? So ultimately, we'd love customers to work with Databricks, but for some reason, if you choose not to work with us after, being part of our community, it's still your data. There's no lock-in with us, right? But we are so confident you'll remain with us that people do.
And I think, I think this past week or so has really highlighted that where Microsoft has adopted the Delta format for their Fabric.
Fabric, yes. So it's
platform.
So it's like a little love letter, isn't it? Yeah, exactly. That it was built on this. They all have their own kind of like Parquet format, and they have some specialization around it. But essentially, it is the core of what we've done, and that is interesting right there. Yes. Yeah. Yes. They're also still encouraging their customers to still pursue investments back into Databricks. So it's still called Azure Databricks. So there's a whole write-up about that. I'd love to. We could obviously share that with you guys and your readers if they need to.
No, 100%. We could probably link to it even.
Exactly. Yes.
Tell me, let's back up a second. So for the more generalist technologists out there, give me the 5th grade summary of what Databricks is, maybe an example or two of like in the energy space, how somebody would use it, things like that.
Yeah. So Databricks, if you think about it in terms of like let's take a step back as to we know that AI is basically a technology that will be more productive than it would be, I wouldn't say destructive as such. That's not a good word, but it's definitely a much more productive technology. And we see a lot of CIOs and CDOs and people investing in AI, right? We know that. And then we also know that there's, billions of dollars invested in that for success, right? And people have, not just invested resources, but they've invested, in terms of technology, and they've made big bets on AI. But actually what we also see is that the data does say that a lot of these AI products are unsuccessful and they don't go into production. So we looked into why that is, right? And it has to do with kind of this challenge around the managing of data, right? So if you look at data, how it was created originally, we had warehousing, and that's really what Snowflake focuses on, is data warehousing. In data warehousing, you had really good things like good business insights, but you had challenges around data warehousing. You had challenges around artificial intelligence. But also data warehousing is very structured, and the level tenure exactly, and you also lack like the scalability and the volume of data as it changes to deal with unstructured data, and that's changed. So then these data lakes kind of popped up over time, and as the data lakes kind of popped up, and basically we found that you could scale data and it was great. You could do unstructured data, and the volumes of data was great, and you could do AI on it, but you kind of lacked governance.
Right.
right? And you kind of lack that security and governance that you know.
It just kind of turns into a mess, even like it's so unstructured.
Right.
You know?
It's,
Yeah, exactly,
it's just the data garbage
So
can.
so what the technologists did was, and this is in Databricks, they kind of built technology to kind of build the gaps. But by creating more technology and more sources, you had different data formats. You were communicating. You actually created more bottlenecks in terms of communicating. The cost for it goes up. So those AI projects were kind of delayed because the cost and the delays, go to market was kind of failing. You couldn't reproduce training sets. You couldn't do any of that stuff. So
or you had your data, say, in a Snowflakes or a SQL data warehouse, but then you had to get it out to run your models on, rather than,
yeah. And so, like, time to market was kind of failing. And if you're a CIO, you're seeing a cost for AI projects kind of rising, and you think, I don't want to invest in this anymore.
Right.
So it's challenging, right? So what we did was basically take that technology, which was Delta, which was a core engine, use Databricks, and kind of create this thing called Lakehouse. So we kind of took the best of both worlds. Took the best of the data warehousing world, which is the structure and governance, and then we took the flexibility of a data lake and kind of created a lakehouse. So all of it's in one place. So like the communication and the issues have all been kind of resolved. So you create a single platform for people to work. So from a fifth grade, and this is kind of a long definition, but from a simplified version,
it's perfect.
A single place to actually work allows you to communicate faster and share information faster, right? A single format that's open, that's flexible, that there's no vendor lock-in, there's no proprietary lock-in, means that you can engage with lots of other open source technology. You're not vendor locked in, and you can work in multiple languages. So there's no language lock-in. SQL, R, Scala, Python, great. You can kind of work in all these things. You can work in notebooks. You can share notebooks easier. You can share data easier. So it just makes it faster time to fail, right? So bad ideas would fail faster, and good ideas go to the front.
Yep.
Like we've seen some data where we've increased training set time, and also we've decreased training set time, but we've doubled the data set size. So all by kind of just creating this kind of ETL platform for just kind of doing this thing. So that's really it.
No, I mean, it's a pretty fascinating platform. Looking into, because again, it serves all the different pieces of that data team, right? Like the data engineer can use their Spark and everything, create the pipelines. And again, to your point, you can write those in a Jupyter notebook type thing, and you can actually deploy them that way, right? You don't have to I don't have to pull it out, put it into Python script now, and now schedule it with Airflow. I mean, you can do that within the platform, right?
That's right.
But then that data gets put into the Lakehouse, and you have your Delta tables, right? But then, the business analysts can hit it with the SQL Photon engine, right? And they can pull it into Spotfire and do descriptive analytics. But then your data scientists can use that same data and run their AI models. But the thing that fascinated me, I went to like the Databricks in a day or whatever it was a couple months ago. It was just like, all right, now the outputs of their models go into their own Delta table, and then those are actually accessible, say, to the business analysts if they want to pull those in. So I mean, it is truly one kind of unified
compounding.
And even if you don't want to use, and I love Typical, right? So I like Spotify. But like even if you don't want to use that, if you just want to create visualization, like the notebooks, we have our own notebooks, and even if you don't want to use any of these high-end visualization tools, we have like DB SQL. You can get some visualization within the notebook that can immediately give you results. Like, so a business analyst or like a business stakeholder wants to see some results from either data engineering or data science. They can see that immediately. Yeah. Right. They can make quick decisions. They can make decisions faster, all in the same place.
Well, and maybe some of this is driven by it, but I know it was a couple years ago, you guys acquired the Bamboo Lib or whatever it was from, and that was kind of the ability to write some, was it pandas or something, but kind of with a GUI?
We use pandas. Yeah. Exactly.
So I mean, I think that's interesting too. Like once you get full scale, like you don't, like you're saying, you don't even have to leave the Databricks platform.
You don't have to, and we are growing right now. We've been making some new acquisitions, and we are growing. We're trying to make it. We love feedback from the customer base out there. This is why we're increasing our kind of like user groups, and we want to have. And the way we do user groups is we actually have a client hosted, because that's much more authentic. Did you attend the one that was in Houston?
Yeah, this was pretty recently. It was at right there. I work in City Center, so it was right over there at the Microsoft building above Avanade, I think.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
That was hosted by Microsoft. Yeah, exactly. So we have our clients, our partners hosted, and that's great. We're going to having more of these in Houston. We have them all around the world right now. So this is kind of good, and it's actually community based. So the community speak about it, and we love feedback, and we want to improve. So yeah, we want to work with people to grow, especially in like Texas itself it's an energy capital itself, and there's challenges around that. And then to John's point earlier, he said it's kind of nice to see someone from the oil industry kind of go into tech. There's a lot of that. Right? Yeah. I mean, what else do you do with your time right now? Take that kind of knowledge and help tech understand what's going on, and then when you speak to your fellow colleagues in the industry, you add more kind of credibility to that conversation.
Yep.
Right? Because you understand the problem, and you've worked in the same field, so you understand that.
Yeah, and I think one thing I would want to highlight too, and maybe you can highlight a little more, is like, because I know at one point, especially I thought of Databricks as like, because Azure Databricks was one of the first ones, but like I think make sure people understand like Databricks can be run on any of the
It's cloud agnostic.
Well, I don't know about agnostic, but like any of the major cloud platforms.
It works on all 3 major cloud platforms.
Yeah, so you can deploy Databricks on Google or on Azure or on AWS.
So Google, Azure, AWS work with the three major clouds, and we now have, and this is public, we now even have a I don't want to call it on-prem, but there's a way. So we have a partnership with Dell.
Okay.
Great. We can add a link to that, where basically you can have data basically stored,
if you have your own private cloud.
On private cloud, basically send that to Databricks to be created. So it's a great example of especially in the oil industry, where for data residency issues, communication issues, you may have to have some data on-prem. You can basically store the data and then push it into the cloud and basically manage that.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And because then also you can also deploy some of the stuff as say IoT devices as well, right? Models that
you can deploy the models. So we'll use the model deployment tool. So the curation will be in Databricks, and then we'll use MLflow, which is our orchestration tool to kind of manage that entire cycle. And then the deployment will be via whatever mechanism that you use out there. But exactly right. Yeah. And that's how it should be, right? It should be everything. All the high-end compute should be in the cloud. Development should be in the cloud because it's cost-effective.
Yeah,
it makes more sense. And then you push to the edge for doing some
running the model,
and basically doing errors.
Yeah, no, that's how we linked up. Was when I was at HiveCell.
Yeah, hey, that was a great product. I like that.
Yeah.
R.I.P.
But it just even looked pretty cool.
No,
it's like,
there's so many things I think they were doing right, and then of course there's so many things just holistically with Edge that is still so early and new that there's a lot. Like CI/CD, for example, I'll just take that category, right?
Yeah.
No one has figured that out for Edge yet.
For Edge,
yes. That's going to be a very tricky thing, specifically in oil and gas, where you have connectivity intermittency and things like, okay, I'm pushing a software update to my remote server, all 100 of them across a field or across the country. Well, 2 of them, the internet went out in the middle of the update.
Of course it would.
What do you do? We just bricked those servers. So now what? Yeah. And so there's so many nuances and things around Edge that need to be solved. But I'm still pretty optimistic, and I'm glad companies like Databricks are incorporating and looking at,
they are.
It's not just for today,
and it's not just oil and gas. Right. This could be manufacturing, it could be retail, because like cloud it's just access to the data that's a challenge, right? So cloud technology is just fantastic right now. It's cheap, it's effective, it's everywhere. The data centers are getting much more global right now. But where our clients are and where our background comes from, you're in the field a lot. Mm-hmm. You could be on a rig, on a ship somewhere, and satellite communication may exist, but it's usually the bandwidth is actually usually channeled for ship operations rather than actually internet communication. So even if there is internet, they'll basically choke their internet. So updates will be restricted.
Yeah, that was actually one of the first. I think one of the first pilots that they did when I was there was that we were investigating was with a international shipping company, right? And they've got a ship that it basically has its own SCADA system running on it, but it's now connected to a cloud-based SCADA platform that doesn't really work because they've got satellite comms that are incredibly intermittent.
Yeah.
But they've got all this data that they would love to be able to do something with, especially around, the thing that makes you the money, which is your boat.
Yeah.
And so how do we do that, right? But I'm excited to see what the future for Edge in general holds. Like I said, I think there's a ton of things that need to be solved, but I think there's a lot of promise there. And I'm glad companies like Databricks are set up for it at the very least.
Think about yourself as a person, in your private life, right? So we have a lot of devices on us. Yeah. That's an edge device.
It's an incredible edge device.
It's an edge device. Yeah. It's just that normally there's a telecoms communication thing. Mm-hmm. But I don't know, maybe out in Yellowstone somewhere, and it's like, it's possible.
Yeah.
There's no telecom, so what do you do? Does that become useless? No, you should be able to have functionality on that device.
Yeah. No, that's I think one of the case studies that I found when I was first getting into it was this article around I don't know what algorithm it was, but Facebook Meta put out about how they're doing like a hybrid kind of setup with their processes where they're essentially using the phone as the edge device. So they'll run certain processes on the edge device first if they can, or if the communication is low, then they'll try and localize it versus pushing it up to the cloud and just things like that. And you're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, you know, if you think about it that way. And so it's fascinating. I mean, then you look at like the flip side of that, which is like a Tesla, right, where they custom built their own edge computers for all of their devices, and they're trying to do federated learning and all this really interesting, fascinating stuff. And still, we're going to be, I don't know, 5-10 years away from completely self-driving, maybe, if we get to that. I don't know.
Well, then
it's
you
just
need to get the adoption, people
yeah.
to feel good about it.
So it's the
like,
adoption.
The adoption, the
I
policy.
think the technology is almost there.
My issue is with the outliers with most AI, right? Is it's even with Tesla, you know, having constant data and calculations and models running, you still, you know, run into those random outlier cases where it doesn't know what, you know, a garbage truck that's painted all white looks like, and so it runs into the back of it.
Yeah,
for
or
no reason, yeah.
a guy on a motorbike was once hit by a Tesla because it just didn't detect it. Yeah.
Didn't recognize it.
well,
Right?
yeah, no, I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole, but like then the thing comes into like insurance. Who's at fault?
Yep. No, I remember vividly when they first started talking about autopilot, there was a whole paper about like, well, we're going to have to program the computer, you know, just to make a decision of if, you know, do I hit this pedestrian or do I turn my car into a brick wall and kill who's going to, like, there's this ethical piece of it of like, well, if someone's going to die, how does it determine, like, or potentially if both outcomes are bad?
Oh, I have one. I have one for you. So MIT runs this kind of this use case, this AI terrible use case scenario, a no-win scenario, and it's basically driving a car, and it has automation in it, and it's worst case scenario. It's snowy, it's icy. You're kind of driving down here, and you're on this no-win scenario, and essentially you're on a bridge, and basically your brakes fail, mechanicals, nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So the car has to kind of like. The mechanics of it. The car can only steer to
Right.
basically move. It can't actually slow down. So it's something. It's now like on the left is a bridge, and if you go off the bridge, you will basically perish. And on the right, it's basically a bunch of like school kids.
Right. It's a school bus. Yeah.
And then in front of you is basically a crossing area for like senior citizens, and they're crossing at the time. What should the AI do?
Right.
Like who should it endanger? Right. That's a no-win scenario. Right, and so that they ask me what you should do, and people are like, oh well, you know, they make this horrible scenario. It's like, well, you know, the senior citizens, they've lived a lot longer, so you know they should take the hit for
getting crazy.
It starts getting hits. Like I don't know those kids. You know, it's like, and so ultimately, what it comes down to is that what people don't want to say is what we all think is like, no, the car should save my life.
Yeah,
right. That's what it should do. It should save me and my family, right? But the answer to that is, I think the AI just goes, we don't know.
Yeah.
It shouldn't make a moral decision based on those things, right? Because it's impossible. We can't make that thing.
Right.
We always say, I would do my best to save everyone's life, but it's a no-win scenario.
Yeah. No, I remember in college taking some very interesting, the one psychology class I took, and it was fascinating because you have all those,
those
moral, ethical conundrums that you throw out there. You know, would you kill a baby to save the world, or like,
so these are all like that, right? Heavy questions, and fundamentally, they're never really about the scenario. They're always about yourself and what you're doing. And actually, what we realize is we'll do everything for self-sustaining. And actually, that's what we want our AI to do, is to help us, but to try and mitigate as much external damage as possible, but also to save us as us.
Right. The best worst case scenario.
The best worst case scenario is like,
I think I have the perfect opportunity for a Billy Madison reference, but business ethics.
Business.
No. But no, while we're on AI,
let's go.
Or LLMs. So Databricks released their own DALL-E LLM open source model, right?
And then I always had to correct people on this because I was like, well, isn't that like DALL-E the painting? No, not that one.
Well, yeah, because there is the DALL-E.
There's the DALL-E thing.
This is like DALL-E, like a
this is DALL-E the sheep.
DOLLY.
This isn't the OpenAI DALL-E image generator.
This is the sheep, DALL-E the sheep, because it's a clone, the first sheep that was ever cloned, and I don't know if DALL-E's still alive right now.
Yeah.
I don't know if she's out there.
Probably not.
Probably not by now. But so we have this
really expensive
and
laptop.
It's great. I mean, so I even if I don't want to, and I always want to, but even if I'm talking about something else, the whole world is talking about LLMs.
Yeah.
And we had no idea what they were like 3 months ago.
Yeah.
Like, to be perfectly honest, like, well, I mean, we kind of knew what NLP was. And if you're in the business, you know a little bit about what large learning models are, you know what natural language processing is, but you never really got too invested into it because we all were deeply focused on machine learning, on deep learning. That's really where we were. And then suddenly, I mean, I think the techies out there were playing with OpenAI.
Mhm.
I was playing with DALL-E back in the day because I liked it. Was generating gimmicky images. And I was kind of excited about that. And then ChatGPT came out, and the whole world just suddenly it's like
it's definitely an inflection point. That's what.
It's definitely. So will ChatGPT be the technology that will change the world? I don't think it. I mean, it's definitely got us talking about it. It may not be ChatGPT itself. OpenAI itself is not necessarily open because you have to
pay for it.
Well, I liked how their CEO was on Congress basically saying that now it should be regulated. Now that I've got a foothold, let's regulate the hell out of it.
I saw yesterday they're on pace for 1 billion users
already,
I mean, and it's like,
it's tremendous.
It's tremendous. Like, and actually, in all honesty, I suspect we all use ChatGPT.
Yeah,
I use it for like most random things, for like my kids like daycare stuff, or like my kid who's in maybe for his like elementary school stuff. Like, tell me how I can create a report on these things that for a 5th grader or something, something like that.
No, it's so flexible. Although it's interesting because I don't know if you told me about it or if Jake told me about it, but the leaked Google memo, I think it was within the last month or so, but it was a memo from some Google exec, C-suite, whatever, basically that got leaked. It was an internal memo, got leaked externally, but the summary of it was essentially we thought large language models were going to be better, so that's what we focused all of our time and efforts on, and that was a complete failure. And looking at OpenAI is clearly in the lead at the moment. However, we believe that open source is actually going to be the route in the future because of how quickly it is accelerating things while also keeping things light. Like the whole thing was talking about how actually lighter models are being surprisingly just as effective as a lot of these big ones. Plus, they're easier to run, they're faster, etc. But looking at it from essentially the open source community is allowing the innovation and the rate of innovation to change so quickly with this stuff that we don't, and efficiently, most importantly, that we don't even have to necessarily throw a ton of R&D at it. We can just take some open source models and kind of do the Microsoft Google model, which is take somebody else's really good idea that got proven out and integrate it into everything that we have and make people rely on it, right? And so I'm very curious to see how that plays out. I'm also curious on your kind of opinions on that, just because open source has its place.
So this comes up quite a bit, right? So let's go back to the energy industry itself. So, and everyone's data is fundamentally confidential and very important, right? So what we are seeing is that there are challenges that people that have OpenAI and they have ChatGPT as part of their corporate agreement is that they can't do the actual operational work in this thing, because you can't share confidential data and client data and your own data in this. So you can do personal things, you have to leave the environment. But also the challenge is what we're seeing is that also it's like, how do you train? The cost of training these models are quite expensive, right? So so DALL-E, our version, our LLM out there, we trained, I think, with three computers out there, and it cost like $30, and we were able to train a set. Yeah. And it's a fairly young, it's a young data set itself, and it's doesn't have the maturity of ChatGPT, and it was never designed to. It's still growing and learning, but the fact that we could do it with a cost of less than $30, right, means that anyone can do it, right?
Incredible,
incredible, yeah. And also being open source and following open standards means that the model itself can be interrogated. And this is where kind of like bias comes into it, right? So we can't eliminate bias, I think, from human nature. That's a challenging psychological concept, and I don't think it's possible, but we can certainly look into if bias has become an issue in terms of giving results and decision making. Like if the model is open, you can interrogate it, you can see where decisions are being made, and you can train it. Right? But if you can also if everything's going, if decisions are being going and results are being generated in one direction, you feel that direction doesn't represent what maybe the reality is of an answer. Because remember, anything generative is a probabilistic answer.
Right.
Yeah.
It's never really 100%, right? It's as close to it as it could be. But if you feel that it's not really closer to what you should feel like, well, you can add to that model.
Right.
Right. And that's what it is. And now we're seeing, like, especially in operators, oil and gas operators, they've got like, I would say thousands of acronyms and words they use and historical information that's written on paper, written on context. Ingest all of that into an LLM model, but you can train it within your environment. So DALL-E and the open source models that train within your environment and never have to leave your environment, well, then you also reduce the possibility of leaks.
Right.
Of actually errors that are coming out there.
And that's what I wanted to ask when I brought up DALL-E. Like, I mean, because I feel like I high level understand, but like, can I take DALL-E and I can train it on some geologic data, or I can train it on or some interpretations that we've done, and then can I feed new ones into that, and it should be able to give outputs similar to what we trained them, or I mean, just trying to think fundamentally how could I use an open source LLM like within my company? Or
I mean, it's not really meant to be. You could do something like that. I mean, you could train it right on different models, and it is text based. I mean, it's fundamentally giving you text out there, so it has to understand what's going on. So what you could do is actually ingest maybe not just the operational data around a thing. What about all the email communication? All the reports around, right? So let's say you want to basically get a report. Let's say a
drilling report.
A drilling
daily
report.
Drilling
right?
report. Right.
Daily drilling report.
POOH.
On 100 wells, right? And like normally it'll just be a whole bunch of text out there. But actually, with DALL-E, you can probably ingest all that text and summarize that into something more contextual based on what the expectation could be.
Right.
Right.
It's like in agile dev, right? It's red, yellow, green, right? Like, because in those morning meetings, they don't care if things are going well. They want to know where the bad things are.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
So
what's behind?
Well,
what's slowed down?
It's not interesting, and then they kind of want to detect something. And you can create a lot more in context demos and training and contextual information that's actually closer to kind of the language, the corporate language you use in your organization. Right? Because a lot of the language that's used in the oil fields and in service companies are not. I mean, I don't mean the grammar. I mean the actual terminologies are not normally public information. They won't be in any of the training models that exist. It's jargon, right? The industry jargon is basically very specific. You could even have corporate jargon. That's specific to your operations.
Need an MBA library.
So you can use NLP to ingest all that information, and basically then start producing a model that can just give you a much more informed, near humanistic response to that, right? And what's important is what we're seeing. This is to be identified: is that the oil industry is changing. The utility industry is changing in the sense that it is also. This isn't an ageist comment, but a lot of people with great domain knowledge have left the industry. They moved on. They've taken their retirement boats and they're living great lives. Hopefully, they moved on. And so you have a younger generation that are very smart, but they don't have that in context domain knowledge, and a lot of that is being lost. So that tribal knowledge that's missing, you can use AI to basically and NLP and large learning models to maybe help you create tribal knowledge that can be trained,
institutionalize it. And,
No, I mean
that's where we kind of thinking where it'll be.
I think that's a huge deal, because I think you look at any EY insert consulting company here report about energy executives and the things that they worry about, and people and knowledge is like the top every year regardless. And it's, how do I retain the knowledge of these people that are retiring or that are leaving, especially in oil and gas specifically, the crew change generational gap that there is. And I think I don't think a lot of people realize that this is a huge benefit of these models if you can internalize them with your company. It's not just, it's like we use Notion, right, for our kind of wiki, so to speak. But it's like the wiki now gets fed into a model, and now the model knows everything about everything in your company wiki without you having to go find it, or without someone who doesn't even know where it lives. They can just ask it a question.
And I think that you nailed it right there, right? It's reducing speed of time to find information. Like even with Google right now, like we didn't know we needed.
It's very interesting.
Open, we didn't know we needed ChatGPT for information, and because we had Google.
Who would have ever thought that that's how you start searching for things?
Yes.
Right. Like even though it's like a very, to me, intuitive way, right? Like instead of me chopping up my Google search of top restaurants,
Yes.
Charleston, South Carolina, right? Like instead of that, I can just tell it, hey, I'm going to South Carolina in this dates and I want to eat at seafood restaurants.
You could even have it more realistic. Like, where can I find great seafood restaurants that serve great calamari?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then it'll probably pull up, it'll probably take information from reviews and then put it up there and give you something.
That's the most interesting thing with the plugins yet, or with GPT. I haven't used it with the plugins, but Colin has, and he said it's pretty interesting as far as like, you know, Yelp, for example, or TripAdvisor. Like you've got all these things, especially around like the travel stuff, right? Like being able to tell it, hey, I want to plan a trip to some kind of destination that's going to have good weather during this week of this month of this year, and I want to, you know, go to a sporting event and I want to eat the best at the best steakhouse. Tell me where, and it'll do it. And it's
now it shouldn't be used for like back, you know, in the industry. Like let's say you're looking at, you know, power turbines, right, or wind turbines, you know, in you know, in renewable, or even, you know, turbines for the utility industry. Like you shouldn't be able to say things like, tell me how turbine 13 is doing, right?
Right.
Because actually, it's not going to ingest the operational data. It'll probably just ingest the reports around it.
Sure.
That's where it's going to make sense. And also, it won't be real time because it has to be trained and models around it. And it won't be, you know, minute by minute, right? But it's never designed for that.
Yeah.
It's designed to basically, I guess, summarize information, contextualize it, and make it easier for you to find things.
But I mean, I can see for like for legal, a huge. I mean, you get these massive legal documents. Like, you feed it that, and then like,
I mean,
give me the Cliff's notes. Yeah, like
that's honestly like, so in my master's, I took whatever, I can't remember the specific name of the class, but it was legal and policy, I think. And one of the things of it is going through legal documents, MSAs, etc. And a lot of that workflow is literally just, this is from the hacks from my professors that they told us. It's like Control F, and you have a list of keywords that you go and you search for to try and find in this 60-page legal document. Right? And it's like, feed this into a LLM and let it tell me the things that I need to be looking for.
Short it down to, you know,
I don't speak
300 characters.
Yeah. But you have to also be careful with LLMs, and because what we've also found at LLM is as powerful and as fantastic, even a ChatGPT,
which very confident, even if it has no right to be.
I found that this term recently, and you know, and I'm proud to say that, I'm honest enough to say that I've never heard of this term, but machines hallucinate. That's now apparently a term for it. Just like if it doesn't know something, I think it's because it's still a kid. It's still growing, and it's still basically, we think it's this like mature professional out there, but it's probably only in his third grade. Or like fourth grade kid, you know, and it's like, I don't know the answer. I'm just gonna make it up.
Right.
And that's the risk. They start to hallucinate because they don't know. Sometimes they basically just kind of put stuff together. So we have to be very careful as to like also, and this comes back to us as a population or a species, like, and this is not just LLMs, but this is for all information that's generated, all generated. It's like, you gotta basically put that in context of like, it's a probabilistic answer.
Right.
How much of it are you going to trust based on your own knowledge?
Yeah.
And if you're hyper confident in the answer and it's wrong, then it's on you, not on the engine.
It's a trust but verify.
System
for sure.
But I mean, and the whole AI thing. I mean, I do want to pivot off the AI at some point because we could spend all afternoon on this. But like, for me, again, ChatGPT and some of this, these are things that we just know about. Like, I mean, like, we don't know what Russia's working on behind the scenes. We don't know what China's working on behind the scenes, or even our own government is working on, you know, for their own.
This is what's public.
Yeah.
This is what's public.
I mean, and how's it going to be weaponized? I mean, just with, now all the deep fakes and everything, those are getting better, like,
that's gonna
every day. I mean, like, it just, how are we going to know what's real and what's not? Like,
so, I think there was a letter that came out with a whole bunch of like very famous people, scientists, stop progress on AI. And it made no sense. Because for exactly that reason, the bad actors were not gonna listen to it, right? They were still gonna go ahead, and even if you stop for 6 months and like there'll still be a spike of like deep fakes coming out there.
That's it's, to me, it's very comparable to, like, not to get political, but like the gun argument, right? It's like, once the cat is out of the bag, once the guns have been sold into the world, like in the US, you've got millions of guns out there. It's very hard to take it back. Once so AI is into the universe and in this open source world,
the answer then comes, and it's also true for even that example is it has always come back to us as a society and how to manage it. And I still think we have to re-educate ourselves.
Absolutely.
Right, as to how to trust but verify.
Yeah.
That's where we're lacking, and that's also true for managing firearms, right? So it has to do. It's trust but verify, but it's education on us as to like, wait. I just got a link that said this thing, and it matches exactly what I'm thinking about. So it has to be true. No, follow where that source comes from. Yeah. Right. Oh, it's a weird URL. So then obviously it's not a real thing. So follow that. Is anyone else outside your bubble thinking that way? Right. And so that's how it is. And I always say this example, right? So if there's a doctor out there that's using ChatGPT to make diagnostics of patients, find another doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because like it could simplify things, but actually like it's probably not accurate as well. Well, if he's only using that, and no doctor really is only using that.
I think that's the biggest key, because I one of the case studies I used at HiveCell was I think it was for breast cancer, but a doctor, like whatever, groups of doctors would have a 70 to 80% chance of identifying early stage breast cancer from MRIs and CAT scans and stuff. Not CAT scans, but and then like the ML model that they had by itself would get like, it was slightly less, like 60 or 70%. But then the doctor plus the AI model exceeded, I think, 90%.
Yeah.
And so like that is the power of this, right?
That's exactly
that 10 to 20% delta is literally hundreds or millions of people's lives that get saved because of it, right?
With correct diagnostics.
Significant.
So he also isn't just using only the
it's a tool.
It's a tool. Mm-hmm. You still have to basically rely on your own kind of, and the experts around you. So it's that trust but verify.
Yeah. It's what they hammered into all of us in math, right? Yeah. Know the bounds of your formulas.
So back to like society, the issue has never been, I think AI will just exponentially grow into something that will be very powerful, and we'll use it, and it will have some negative impacts as well. That's obvious. That's with all technology. Natural. And those impacts will have some dire consequences as well. But it comes down to us, I think, to re-educate ourselves as to how to handle it. Trying to stop it is impossible.
Right.
It's already out there.
It reminds me very much of like the early days of the internet, like Napster and things like that, right? Like this is new, it's exciting, but it's the Wild West. And over time, guess what? Shit gets figured out. Like we iron things out. We hopefully always do. But no, like I saw, I think it was a tweet yesterday about this law firm that has now been sanctioned by a U.S. judge because in their documents, which were, come to find out, written by some, at least partially written by GPT, it cited 3 court cases that don't exist.
I've seen this.
Yeah, wow.
I've seen this. Exactly right. Yeah.
Like that's they should get better lawyers first of all.
Yeah, so that's a good example.
That person should lose their bar license.
Exactly. You find a new lawyer because that's just said, we pulled up some information and we didn't verify it and we went out there.
Yes.
Yeah.
A much lower risk kind of use case that I've also seen was Colin and I were doing something on it. We were trying to get it to analyze some kind of data set. And of course it's not made for analyzing statistical data, but it was like, just send it. He asked it, how can I get you, can I upload this data or whatever? And it's like, no, you can just send it to me. And it gave whatever, ChatGPT@gmail.com. And I was like, is this real? Are we going to be able to send it like a CSV and it'll pull the data in? And of course not.
Of course not. Yeah.
It did. And I was like, are you sure I can email you something? It was like, no, I'm a natural language model. And it's just like, well, how did this even happen?
Yeah, exactly. Well, what if someone did? Or what if that was, it was hacked somewhere? Mm-hmm. So it's just insane.
So to kind of pivot back to, again, traditional Databricks, not Databricks in 2 years when you can turn all your LLMs on it and do everything there. But like, say people watching this, like, can you give them are there some case studies or use cases,
high level use cases
that, name names if you're able to or not, but like, say the end to end, like, Databricks experience, like how
they
are
came
people
to you
using
with
it?
This problem, implemented Databricks, and then they got this result, which led to X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, so there's lots of it, right? So if you want to think about the industry itself, we have hundreds. Recently, I think it's over 500 like energy customers around the world globally at different stages of it, and essentially, like the use cases, the challenges could range from depending on what those clients do, whether it's energy, oil and gas, renewables, utilities, but the way we solve it is essentially the same for every single client, right? And it isn't meant to. It usually starts with us the ones that we work better with, that are more successful, is the ones that focus on landing data in our platform in the data engineering phase, and we basically do the landing data. So the way Delta works is it has this medallion structure for data. So it has bronze, silver, and gold. So all the metadata and information will land in bronze, and then basically you have curation goes into silver, and then basically gold is your business insight. So that's usually the format we've seen for most successful clients, is landing data, curating data, and then basically creating this ETL pipeline. So the most successful clients we've had usually are solved by basically managing these kind of like ETL platform. Then we do the machine learning, right, as it comes out of it. So
what are people using, like, as a new customer, they're coming in, they were using X, Y, and Z tools, and now they can just use this one tool. What are some of the examples of, like, kind of the
what is it,
the piecemeal?
So normally it would be things like PyData is kind of a traditional one. So they're usually trying to get data from either a turbine, a piece of edge, some SCADA system out there.
IoT.
Exactly. And they want to land data, and they find that the systems that they have in place don't actually allow them to do analytics on this. So they've been landing data.
They're historians.
Well, you have to have historians to save data, but they were never designed for data analytics.
Right.
So they had to save data on some environment and pull it into another environment and look at it there. So with Databricks, you can land data directly into Delta and get that analytics within those 2 or 3 stages.
Yeah.
And then basically get some idea of it, which means you can get some visualization, even with like DB SQL, of like how some piece of equipment is performing in near real time, not real time, because we are an analytics platform, and we focus on it. We're very, very fast, but we don't sell ourselves as this.
I think that's a whole argument in and of itself, is what is real-time data.
Exactly.
Yeah, what does that mean to you?
Near real-time is what most people actually mean.
It's near real-time, right? Exactly.
Like,
and we need to be pretty, and I think everyone needs to be, the honesty is, it is near real-time. It's pretty fast.
The Spark is batch, generally, right? I mean, like,
it's batch and streaming. So
okay.
we have batch and streaming data coming into it, and so Databricks can get batch and streaming into it. We even have things like structured streaming, so we can actually optimize the fact that in case that stream actually breaks down, we can concatenate it again and merge it into its right place. So we have this kind of technology in place to help you kind of manage that batch flow. So in terms of like use cases, we solve things like asset management, predictive management, predictive maintenance. We're working with customers towards condition-based maintenance. They're going to help you that cost. Supply chain inventory management, managing AMI data. So there's a whole range of these kind of use cases. But it fundamentally starts with getting data into Databricks, into that format, so you can get quick visualization, quick analytics on that, and then you scale up.
Yeah, and getting all of the data into one usable place, right?
Well, let's talk about that. Should you get all data in one place? And the answer is, well, it depends on your use case, right?
That's
exactly. So, like, even with like machine data, like if you can just store the analytics version of it, you could actually get the bulk of that data, which isn't that valuable for analytics, later on.
Yeah.
Right. So you can minimize your cost from that as well. So there's some ways you can help customers. We have helped customers kind of like pipeline clean up that architecture to reduce their cost.
Right. But if I have unstructured data and structured data, and I know I need to use it, Databricks is a great place to be able to get it all into one spot, get it ETL'd into what I want it and how I like it.
Most of our customers have unstructured data coming in, depending on what the media is, and then of course we have a lot of like batch structured data coming in as well, depending on what they want to store. Yeah, so it could be a combination of operational data and financial data being stored into these things and curated and basically working with it.
What's one of the more kind of exciting or interesting projects you've worked on in the energy space that you can talk about? Again, it doesn't have to be in detail, but just generally speaking.
Oh yeah, there was a VP from it was I don't know if it's public or not yet, but it's a super large operator, and basically they were talking about how a single algorithm helped them reduce the cost for CO2, right? And essentially it was Databricks working on them, but they didn't start with actually trying to solve this basically carbon offset problem.
Right.
They actually started with a supply chain inventory problem. That's what the algorithm was designed for, right? So as you know that inventory that's actually out, inventory is not the most exciting thing to think about as actually thing, but in an offshore environment, a missing piece of it's $1 million of NPT per day for a missing piece of equipment. So vendors and operators would actually oversupply inventory just so they can prevent that problem. right? So actually, and in order for you to kind of find out where the inventory is, was taking 48 hours to actually process.
Yeah.
So we went from 48 hours down to an hour. That's a lunch break.
Yeah.
So that's all the entity was that hour, right? So they were able to find out where the piece of equipment was there, and they were able to basically run the operation. So there's very little delay. So that's saving millions of dollars actually in it.
No, that's so before I got into energy, I was in not in energy. Before I got in oil and gas, I was still in energy. I was industrial manufacturing for wind turbine blades.
Yeah.
And industrial manufacturing or industrial engineering is really, really focused on like optimizing every single piece of the manufacturing process, right? Yeah. So I got big into 5S and Six Sigma and Kanban and just in time and all those very interesting things. And then immediately from that, I went to work as a frac engineer, and when prices were high, and like I remember being on location many times and looking out the window and seeing like 10 sand trucks just parked, charging to merge because something happened in the field. We got shut down. The information wasn't communicated to those trucks. So guess what? They came out on their schedule, and we're being charged out the ass for absolutely nothing that could have absolutely been prevented.
But the risk of them not being
is much
worse, right? But then how do you balance off that thing? And the answer is data, right? It's actually you can do demand forecasting, you can make the predictions out there. Now, the client that actually made that quote about how we reduce the cost for transportation, it was the same algorithm, the same process that they use to scale across all their use cases. Right? They use Databricks to actually do that, create those pipelines, reduce the communication kind of gap between, handing off between data engineers, data scientists, and stakeholders. So the projects and all the models were able to be developed faster. And that was really it. And they scaled out. They weren't trying to solve it, but actually what they found was because they were so efficient in supply chain management, they weren't buying more inventory, which means that their CO2 footprint was actually reduced because they weren't oversupplying it. So there's a knock-on effect of it.
So you get the ESG checkbox plus the CFO isn't pissed off that you're over ordering on inventory.
Exactly. So there's but we have some really cool examples like in the utility space as well. It's not renew. Yeah, there was a client in North America which was trying to like scheduling of rivers and their substations. So it's a scheduling issue, ingesting weather pattern data coming into it because they had turbines going as well. Weather impacts a lot of decisions, so we were able to ingest the weather pattern data. We were able to then make the predictions as to the demand for energy, and then because of the way our ecosystem works, we actually brought a partner to kind of help us solve it. Because while we are very good at what we do, we don't have the answer for everything.
Right.
So we can bring a partner in to help us kind of solve these problems. And they did, and that's the kind of ethos we like working with. We love working with our ecosystem. We love working with our how we're successful.
Take notes, all the proprietary format oil and gas tech companies that don't want to partner with anybody or anything like that.
It's the path to success.
That's what everybody wants.
Yeah.
I think one thing I want to get in maybe more in the weeds as a developer type, but Databricks kind of handles all because before, say with the data lake, you could do Parquet and all stuff, but you had to set your partitions on your blob storage and kind of manage all that yourself. The Databricks platform, as I understand it, kind of handles a lot of that for you, right? Yep. As far as optimizing the partitions.
On the control side, we have the notebook itself is a control and a control plane and a data plane, and essentially on the control plane, you control all of that. You can just basically launch a cluster, and you can set up what kind of nodes you want to work on, depending if it's multi-node or single node, depending on your gravitas, and you can basically just launch them and start working very quickly.
Yeah, you can just focus on the business logic.
You focus fundamentally on actually that you care about, which is you can spin up a notebook pretty quickly, and you can actually just start going. Yeah. And now that we're kind of working, we're also moving towards serverless itself. That makes it a little bit faster, more cost effective. So
and this is almost a parallel between what we were just talking about on the physical side with more just in time, using what you need when you need it. This is the kind of cloud versus on-prem thing, right? Whereas before with on-prem, well, every now and then I need to use a supercomputer, so I need to buy way over provision the compute.
Yeah, exactly. And then what do you do with that hardware when it's done? And the hardware basically becomes obsolete over a few years.
And if you needed more, you have to wait a significant amount of time to
and
get
I'm
it
usually
in
pretty kind to how we used to do things in the past because that's how it was done. And then 10 years from now we will be doing things slightly differently.
We'll go back and say what were we doing back then?
What were we doing back then? And I actually think my prediction for the future will be that I think all the clouds will basically become it shouldn't matter what cloud you're using. It should be you should be able to get access to all.
It's basically the internet, right?
It's basically
a link.
Internet for data.
It shouldn't really matter where you are, because as a consumer, it's like, I'm here, so I want to use the most powerful, cost-effective entity that exists in this bubble, in this space, because I'm just physically here. So it shouldn't really matter where.
That's because it changes so rapidly too. I mean,
right. Well, and that's where like a lot of my like blockchain interest comes from, is this idea around like distributed compute and things like that, right? Like there's some interesting kind of companies out there, but one of them specifically, you get paid in their token or whatever by allowing them to essentially I can run it I have a node running on my laptop right now, but you just spin up this software on your computer, and now if somebody wants to watch video on this service, the video will buffer at the closest node on the network to their physical location.
Yeah.
Right. And just things like that, where it's like, if you think about, if Apple had some kind of distributed compute SDK on all of their iPhones, and you could then use everyone's iPhone as a giant super distributed computer. You could
wasn't Amazon really doing that with trying to do with their or it was more about sharing the network, but like with their Echo devices, like there's the neighborhood thing or whatever, and it's like if you don't disable it, they can basically share with anyone walking by who also has the Alexa.
Like Comcast does that now with their
the Xfinity Wi-Fi.
Xfinity Wi-Fi.
Right, like I didn't realize it until I was a customer, and when I was sitting in my living room and I saw the Xfinity thing come, I was like, oh. So my router also puts out
an Xfinity
Wi-Fi, and I was like, this actually makes a ton of sense.
Does AT&T do that? I'm curious.
I don't think so.
They may. I'm not aware.
Yeah,
but
I mean, because Xfinity does that. Yeah.
But it's a great concept, right? You've got all this compute power. Why not use it? It's all
giant
around
mesh network in your neighborhood.
It's a mesh network. Yeah, exactly. And that's really where we'll see things going. And so so I guess a mesh network of clouds.
Yeah,
exactly. Irrespective. But then again, it comes down to like, well, how do you, once you get the network going, how do you manage the complexity of the data that's actually processing? And this is where I still believe the open standards, open source of the Lakehouse will work with. Right now, we are, on 3 clouds. I don't know what the future will be for that. So maybe it will be a mesh network stuff. I don't know. That's just a prediction. That's not me.
No, to me, it's one of those things. It's like, man, there's so many possibilities, but it's also like, there's also a lot of ways that could go really wrong.
Because you can share data and you can this but that's just the nature, I think. I'm being quite blasé, but that's just the nature of technology.
It's very early in a lot of it, right? It's just it's fun to always play that game of what does this look like?
Cool.
10 years. Yeah. But what I wanted to ask you. So one of my questions actually is make a bold prediction for for tech in the energy space in 5 or 10 years, but I think that's actually a really good one.
Yeah, I think the mesh network for cloud might be something.
What is something that just either personally or with work, whether it's a software tool, open source, a GitHub repo, a guy on Twitter, what's something that you've recently found or gotten into that you're kind of excited about that some people may or may not know? Like our last guest talked about a Python library for drilling that he thought was really interesting.
I mean, right now I've been mostly focusing on LLMs, right? Because that's really been the only topic that everyone wants to talk about, and that's fun. I mean, that's great. But I mean, I've been trying to figure out like how to learn how to do better and looking at the different types of engines out there, modeling tools out there. So LLMs, I guess that would be something to think about.
What
prompting
outside of GPT, have you used any of the Bard, or actually just got invited to what's it called? It's gonna drive me crazy, but have you used any of the other ones?
Not yet, but I should be getting to some of those stuff.
So I won't put you on the spot and ask you what your favorite cloud is, because it's precarious.
Oh, that's easy. It's a lenticular. It's one shaped like UFOs. You see them out in North Texas.
Touche.
Yes.
Well done.
Keeping the dad jokes going. I love that. That's what I'm here. I'm here for. I've got my hat on.
Cumulus stratonimbus. I paid attention.
Yeah, you definitely toed that line very well.
Yeah, there we go.
Congratulations.
What we'll jump into the kind of speed round with some of this stuff, because I think we've got about 10 minutes left. What is your kind of go-to or favorite either new tool that you found or just existing kind of open source tool?
Delta, man. Delta is the way to go. Yeah, exactly. It's the core for what we're doing, and it's where we're seeing success, even with Delta sharing.
That's a good answer.
Actually, look at Delta sharing. That would be something to think about.
Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's us.
What about board game or video game?
Oh, that's easy. God of War 2. You play that?
I haven't, but I've seen the trailer. And
How old is your kid?
4 and 6.
So you'll weep when it's over.
Yeah.
Every man weeps, dude, when they play that game. Yeah.
That's the first one was great.
But this is better.
No, I just recently jailbroke my kid's Wii.
Oh yeah.
Please don't shut me down, Nintendo. But
Yeah.
I'm having a blast just playing
stuff. Yeah.
old Wii games with them. Although I don't recommend that for if you have really young kids, because that's a exercise in frustration with a 3-year-old trying to teach them how to use a Wii controller.
Yeah, no. It's up here. No, it's down there. It's swinging the ball. Swing it. Yeah, it's like no. Yeah. Exactly.
But he just hands it to me. You do it. Yeah. I'm like, okay.
So play God of War 2, man. Like, I mean, like I have this conversation with my wife all the time about how she's like, why are you playing games? Like, because it's a multi-billion-dollar industry and they're now more powerful, and eventually these video games will become the way we see movies going forward.
Yeah, well, even had The Last of Us. Really good TV show that was based off a video game.
Based on a video game, yeah, exactly. Great.
That was a great game.
That was a great game. I did not like the second one as much as I liked the first one.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a great game and became a great show. I really like God of War. I was surprised. The thing, forget the action behind God of War and the playability, but the way they build the characters, like, it just says, wow, that's pretty good.
Right. Yeah. And I feel like it's unique now because I feel like a lot of what I would call kind of classic successful games have gotten into more just like, how do we pull more money out of people? Because whether it's skins or etc.
Yeah.
But like the gameplay itself is very light compared to like the stories and the campaigns of 5-10 years ago even. And so it's nice to see games that actually where you can tell the devs that gave a shit and put a lot of thought and effort into it.
There's games out there, there's stories out there. I think my first great example is Red Dead Redemption 2
I love Red
made
Dead,
$700 million in its first week. I was like,
it's insane.
That's an insane amount of money.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
In its first week.
Red Dead was awesome though because it was Grand Theft Auto but Cowboys.
Have you played the second one?
I think I did. I don't know.
I think I did. I think I remember it's pretty like a real cowboy ending. But yeah. But like you like the characters,
right.
You enjoy the thing, and ultimately I still think that's how movies will be interactive, right? Because like now with AI and stuff for generating, voices and action and graphics, we can do stuff.
Well, and then that rolls into AR, VR stuff too, right? Like in the future as well, like all that stuff.
Have you tried I'm not trying to make a pitch here, but the new PlayStation VR 2s?
Mm-hmm.
So that's easily the best VR I've ever seen, even commercially.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you don't get the headaches, you don't get the motion,
right.
But
that is
the quality is there.
That's something we went to. There's Andretti's, which is like
I know it's a high-end gaming place.
Yeah, and they've got all kinds of really interesting VR stuff there. And but the first time I did it, I got off of it and I was like, oh my god, like the motion sickness that you get after getting out of it.
You only played for like 10 minutes.
Yeah, not even.
It's a fortune. Yeah. But this stuff is at your home, so I've been playing for you can play at hour intervals because you get physically tired, right? Because it's very active, so you don't get sick.
That's cool.
Yeah,
wow.
That tells you where we're heading towards.
Yeah, when I saw Meta just released their newest one for it's the cost of a console now, which is wild.
Yep, and then eventually in a few years it'll be commercialized and cheaper.
Well, that's the thing.
Wireless, and then
you had to have like a $3,000 gaming setup just to play.
Well, look how cheap TVs are now. I mean,
that's true.
I can, I put a TV outside, it breaks down. I'll go grab another TCL 4K from Target and throw it up there for $200.
I don't know if you guys remember growing up with the one TV, and if that broke, it was you had to get a guy to come by, and So that the day's over. That's who we are now, right? We'll just How much is a 65 now, like less than $1,000.
Oh yeah, I mean, I can get
less than 500.
Yeah, less than 500. Yeah, I got like a 50-something inch to throw out back for under $300. Like it's 4K. I mean, I'm not a videophile, but I mean, it's good enough for me or anyone else who's sitting out there to watch it.
Doesn't just blow your mind?
And it's all wireless too. I mean, I can just go slap it like a frame on a wall, just like a.
That's right. I have a TV. You don't even need any devices and stuff in there to connect to it. So
it's all Roku, so that it all plays with my account and Wi-Fi, and we're good.
Yeah. Shout out to Roku. If you want to sponsor, please let me know.
Yeah.
I love
Roku.
I love Roku.
You love Roku? Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah, that kind of thing.
You an Apple TV guy or what?
So that's because I think they make the best shows I've seen so far. The best quality shows.
Apple.
I love Apple's
Apple TV. Yeah.
series.
Just finished Ted Lasso.
So Ted Lasso saved Apple TV. There's no Ted Lasso that we know Apple TV.
That's true.
Like I was like really enjoying For All Mankind, which is awesome.
That's a really cool story.
It's a really cool show.
I started it. I haven't gotten
really great show. And then there's a whole bunch out there. Get into Apple TV.
What is the one that my wife and I just watched?
Silo?
No, it's the therapy one.
Oh yes, it's made by the Ted Lasso guy.
Yeah. What is it called?
It's called Shrinking.
Shrinking.
Yeah.
Highly recommend that.
I think I heard someone recommend that to us.
Great,
check it out.
Great series.
And FYI, we don't get paid for saying.
Yeah.
We don't get paid for this yet.
Yeah.
But if Brett Goldstein wants to sponsor something, he can come by.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because he's the writer for that show, and he plays Roy Kent.
Okay, I heard he was a writer, and then he decided like, no, I need to play this character for Roy Kent.
That's awesome. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so he's the chief writer on he's the producer and writer for Shrinking and for Ted Lasso. Yeah.
Oh wow,
that's cool.
Yeah.
All right, definitely gonna check
He's
it out.
He's making good stuff.
Yeah. It's a pretty somber. It's a pretty dark. Like there
are definitely darker parts of it, but it's also just I like how real it is too. Right?
It's a great show. Yeah. So good. I think Apple TV makes really good shows. I don't know how they do it. And maybe that has to do with the quality of writing and the quality of shows and the actors and
probably has to do with they have more money than half of the world.
Yeah,
they can buy the right
people. I would imagine they have more money than studios. Yeah,
you know, we've said it before. They can buy every professional sports team in America
with their cash.
With their cash,
just the cash. Not a loan against their value, but just the cash they have.
Like they could buy.
Yeah.
Like they could buy. Like the Lakers, and they could buy maybe
the Yankees and the
Yankees, and basically say, okay, I want you guys to play. I don't want you guys playing anymore.
Yeah,
it's
just like no, it's like triple.
Crush the fan bases. That would be the ultimate troll. That would be incredible, actually.
Like
and just rickroll them.
Yeah. If Bezos or Elon were just like, I hate this team, I'm gonna buy them.
I'm gonna buy them off and say
sell off all their players for nothing. Oh my god.
Like they could just.
That reminds me of the Texans, but I won't get into that.
Yeah, well.
We got one or two more.
Yeah. So outside of what you can visualize within Databricks, what's your favorite visualization tool?
Spotfire.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Me too. But
because it's neutral, it's pretty. Actually, it's pretty cool too. Yeah.
To me, it's one of the easier to learn. Like
I think it is and it isn't. But I mean, like,
I guess I'm also.
But I mean, I love it. I mean, we use it. I mean, it's just because again, I can do my R or Python in it, and it's super flexible.
It's flexible. It's easy to use. Also, doesn't get you in trouble with any of the cloud partners for not picking their their specific technology. Yeah.
What's a favorite book or an influential book that you like either personally and or on the tech side?
Oh, I've been. I was going to recommend like a Databricks book. No, I mean, this one stumped me.
So my tech one is like Crossing the Chasm because I think it's such a.
You're not the only one that brought that up.
Yeah, it's a really good book.
Yeah,
you not read it?
No.
Oh, you got to read.
You're not the only one that brought that.
You got to read it. Yeah, because it was written in the like early 2000s maybe, but it's still so incredibly spot on today. All it is
it's more psychology almost, right?
Yeah, it's the psychology about technology adoption. So it doesn't matter what type of technology it is, but it talks about, you've got your bell curve of users, right? And that far left side is the early adopters, the tinkerers that just like new shit, right? Like it doesn't have to work, but these are the guys that are going to go, build the Arduinos in their house. And then you get into the next part of the bell curve, which is like the visionary, which is more the kind of tech savvy business user or just in work user that understands the problems that the company faces, but then also kind of can speak some of the technology language and then can kind of see, okay, this thing plus this thing in my business would solve this problem. But then there's the whole idea is crossing the chasm is after that visionary is what they call them. There's this chasm, which then gets you into that 65% of the bell curve, which is the early adopters, the late adopters, and then the tail end is the laggards. But it's fascinating because it just gives you. It gave me, when I first read it, when Bobby and I were working together, when we first started doing our web app, but it gave me this understanding of like, I don't need to go please every single user out of the gate or like add every single feature.
Find those right people.
Right. You find the right people. It talks about, they call it the beachhead or bowling alley methodology of like develop one feature that works really well for a specific user base, then ask them then discover what the next one is. And then they all end up compounding on each other to the point that now you have a legitimate product, app, et cetera, that will appeal to that 70% of the market that you're trying to get into, instead of going in with just one little thing that solves one problem, because it then breaks down the psychology behind each of those user types and how they make business decisions, how they make buying decisions. The thing, that first primary user thinks of things as in risk, right? So moving away from another platform is harder than it would be for a tinkerer or a visionary, but it's a great one.
Yeah.
Okay. This is fun, man.
I really enjoyed it. I mean,
thank you so much for coming.
Covered a lot.
Great to, I know we could.
We could be here for a while.
Yeah,
we're gonna do another one, probably longer, and have some folks in to just do like a round table around like AI and just different topics.
Yeah, in fact, my colleagues who live in Houston, we spoke about this. Get one of them as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, they're really good, especially those either one or the two. That'd be great.
Mike and Kyle, good
how can people find you or learn more about?
I'm on LinkedIn, like most people are. That's usually where it is. Yeah.
And then is it Databricks.com?
Databricks.com. Yeah.
Thanks again, man.
Yeah, man.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. That's it. We'll see you all next time.